Welcome back to the Hearthstone Collegiate Training Grounds. 2 matches now in the books, but we've got one more for you tonight. I'm Nathan Zamora, joined by Bob Backus. And Bob, what a set we just saw between Illinois and Toronto.
Yeah, Toronto now going to 12-0, an undefeated record in this tournament. They only need to lose one game at this point to drop out, but I think it's everything but it's just their tournament to win at this point.
Everything's lining up for it. And again, another close set. So that brings their overall game record to 33-16 now. So they've been winning a lot of close sets throughout this, but getting the job done. So we're staying in the north for our third match of the night. It is the Eastern Michigan University taking on the University of Waterloo. And there we get a glimpse of not only our first rogue of the week, but our third paladin of the week. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, Bob. I am nervous about the paladin for Waterloo here.
I am excited about the rogue, though. We haven't seen one of those this weekend, and it will complete our set of classes, except for priest.
We did see priest.
Classes. Did we see priest this?
Not this week. It was the previous
Probably
week.
Previous week, yeah. So it's going to start to complete our set tonight potentially. These teams are both very interesting in terms of some of the things they brought to the table there. We'll get to that in just a moment. But in terms of lineup, yeah, definitely interesting on the right. On the left, we got the more standard lineup. I'm expecting a self-ban on Paladin over here as the predominant strategy of what to go with in terms of self-bans.
Well, they have no Druid or Warrior, which is the interesting part to me. Those are two of the more powerful decks in the format right now. I'd probably say in order, it's probably like Shaman, Druid, Warrior. And they have foregone 2 of those in terms of the off-meta. The rogue choice, I think, is really cool. I'll talk about that a little bit later on as we get into it, but I'm really looking forward to explaining that one. Here's Eastern Michigan University, Shot Noble, PsyKK, and Spam Dynany, product design and development on 2 of these guys, and a computer science in the other one. So one of the guys is cooking up the program, and the other 2, they're figuring out how to sell it.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of work for Psy there. Hope he has some backup in terms of making the program. I know, it's a lot of hard work when you're a computer programmer, you're a computer science major there. This team is pretty interesting. They actually only joined to get the t-shirt. They didn't think they'd make it this far, but now that they're here, yeah, they're pretty excited about it. One other thing I'd like to call out, these guys were asked, hey, what kind of card would you like to design? They want a Death Rattle card that summons a Death Rattle card that summons another card. They want the nesting doll of Hearthstone cards.
The 3 of them put together is the way that would work.
Which one of them's the bigger one?
I don't know. Who's taller? That's a good question.
Yeah. Oh, no. We're going to have to get him to stand up at some point. Like the kitchen in this background there. Easy access to refreshments during the game. Could play to their advantage, even if it's just a slight benefit for them.
Bob's always looking outside the game for that little bit of advantage. Let's take a look at Waterloo and see what they're bringing to the table. Josh Broman. I knew I was going to struggle with this name as soon as I saw it again. It's Engage Hacker. I just look at it all put together and it just looked always different to me. I practiced it 3 times specifically prior to this, and Lazy Turtle. Science and business, math and business, math and business. Math and science. That's how you Hearthstone.
Yeah, these guys said they met through divine intervention, but seeing 2 math and business majors, I'm betting that was more along the lines of, hey, we're taking the same classes, and probably bumped into each other there. These guys also had one of them applied for Blizzard and actually put their card design in there. So, hey, possible career choice there for one of them. And these guys, not much going on in the background here, as I've always been looking out, but they look excited to be here. Yeah. Hey, I think maybe they got 3 chairs at least, so.
Always looking forward to seeing some guys play some Hearthstone as part of a team. Yeah, that's really interesting to note. I mean, submitting for the design team. I remember when I spoke with Reels before he submit his resume to that, and Reels ended up getting on the design team. And some of my favorite cards just in the game have been touched by Reels at some point. And Darnassus Aspirant was a big one of that, where he tried to figure out a way to create the feeling of a minion giving you extra mana, but only while it was there. And Darnassus Aspirant does exactly that.
Yeah, made an interesting outcome out of the piloted Shredder before it was rotated out
You had to
of
go
standard.
there. You just had to go there.
Bringing back the bad memories. I apologize, Nathan. I'm sorry. We'll go back to standard for you here. There is still a wild format out there with those piloted Shredders and Dr. Boom and all those exciting cards.
Wild's cool, man. I love Wild.
Yeah, Sludge Belcher.
I would love to see some Wild tournaments. I've been itching to play some more Wild lately. Oh, and we're getting the new set with it.
Yeah.
So many of the Mean Streets of Gadgets and cards look like they fit in nicely. But the lineups here, I did want to touch on this Rogue a little bit. I actually think it's a pretty strong choice in the metagame right now. One of its big weaknesses is Mage. But two of its big strengths three of its big strengths are actually Shaman, Druid, and Warrior. It's able to put together so much combo damage versus all three of those classes, and they don't necessarily pressure you so strong early on. If Shaman doesn't get one of those Tunnel Trog Totem Golem openers, the pressure really isn't there. It gives you plenty of time to put together that damage. If they are there, you still have options to offset them with SI7 Agent Backstab, with Eviscerate. There's plenty of ways to fight against it. So I'm actually liking the choice of Rogue in a lot of tournaments lately. Now, when it's a self-ban format instead, that does say a lot, because if your opponent has brought something really aggressive, you don't have the opportunity to strip that away. So that is the one kicker for it in the self-ban format.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it plays out in this one here. Looks like they might have the opportunity to play that Shaman with their Rogue, since they have queued Shaman into Mage in this case. Cult Sorcerer, a great keep against Mage, or against Shaman. If you happen to pick that Arcane Blast up, you can take care of that Totem Golem early on, and there we are.
Rockbiter weapon in the hand. I'm curious if this is the build that I've been seeing Zalae play recently. Rockbiter weapon, of course, was touched by some balance changes recently. It used to cost 1 mana. Now it costs 2, more in line with cards like Dark Bomb and Frostbolt to be a 2 mana, 3 damage card. And of course, Lightning Bolt. It's 1 mana now and 1 mana later. But Zalae has been playing a more aggressive version of Shaman lately, saying that 2 mana Rockbiter is still enough to get the job done in terms of aggression. And it's been suited with Lava Burst coming back into the build and focusing much more on an aggressive game plan. I'm curious if when I see Rockbiter from Waterloo, that's part of the range.
Yeah, very well could be. We'll have to see if we see another card from Shaman, the Doomhammer, come out with that even too. If you have 2 Doomhammers, 1 Spirit Claw in the deck, that's a lot of weapons. Maybe cut one of the Spirit Claws out of there, but Doomhammer can attack twice, and that, of course, is what Rockbiter was combined with a while ago, so that you could deal that massive amount of damage.
Yeah, before the change, we saw Aggro Shaman being the premier version of it, simply because of the turn 6 availability of 2 cards and 10 damage burst. With Rockbiter being there, it slows that to turn 7, and the other thing was sometimes Shaman just had that draw where turn 7 they Doomhammer double Rockbiter for 16 points of damage. That's delayed to turn 9 now because of that. And that's one of the reasons we saw the aggro versions fall out of favor, is they lost that burst speed towards that stage of the game. And so as we get underway, Spirit Claw is, of course, one of the most threatening cards to Mage, because so many of their minions are under 4 health. And that means Spirit Claws can get massive value against them. They're going to have to find a way, Eastern Michigan is, to offset this Spirit Claws, but at the same time keeping the board contained. And that's going to start with, as you mentioned, the Cult Sorcerer and Arcane Blast to answer big threats.
Right, which means we aren't going to see the Cult Sorcerer come down here for sure. If they do choose to play a Sorcerer's Apprentice to get a bigger board out there and possibly avoid the Spirit Claws killing another minion,
the Blood Mage pickup actually is going to be the deviation from that.
Yeah, that's very true. So if we see Blood Mage Thalanos come down here so that they can clear this 3-2, yeah, I think we're going to see that, and Totem Golem's just going to be a little delayed, so that Arcane Blast combo just being put off a little bit further.
Yeah, for Eastern Michigan, I don't think they're too concerned with when they get it, as long as they land that on a turn where they're fairly safe. And so for Waterloo here, I imagine the Blood Mage is just going to be the strongest play. I mean, you get to answer the Cult Sorcerer immediately. That's what this combination is designed for, is to do exactly this.
One of the other interesting things with Spirit Claw's inclusion is that Rockbiter, we were going back to Rockbiter, using it on your own hero is a little bit weaker when you have Spirit Claws in some cases, because you will use one of those charges, and using those valuable charges and the Rockbiter, not necessarily one of the better things you do. Though, I will say this, it does give you another weapon against Totem Golem.
Yep. Same against Flamewaker in this matchup as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think it doesn't give you a better spot against is when your board is clear and they play Acolyte of Pain. So Eastern Michigan are going to play this slow and steady, wins the race. Did Waterloo just take a synchronized bite of something? Did you see that?
Oh, I missed it.
All 3 of them at the same time took a bite of something.
Yeah, I think they're thinking that's a bite of victory coming up here with this, but maybe a little premature.
It's interesting. Maybe it's a ritual.
Could
every time opponent hero powers.
Take a bite of that Rice Krispie treat or whatever.
Out of crime.
Take a bite out of crime.
Now my question is the Mage or the Shaman the criminal in this matchup?
I know what the popular opinion on that might be.
Hashtag Reddit. Yeah, I think it's just hero powers here for Waterloo, which is going to lead me to believe that they're not necessarily playing the more aggressive version. The Lightning Storm and the Hex alongside that are also telling. So Rockbiter in here just as an opt-in for damage effects. And for Eastern Michigan, this is going to be their opportunity, I think, to get Acolyte of Pain on board. But do they want to wait? Is this a card where they feel like they need to get multiple draws from it to keep up the pace with Waterloo in this game? Or do they feel like they need to start getting underway? Because their hand right now is shaping up to be very strong versus anything Waterloo can actually throw at them. But at some point, they're going to have to follow that with pressure.
Right, you can't let Mage build a big hand size. Their Flamewaker will get out of control. One interesting card in Eastern Michigan's hand here, the Arcane Explosion, which we did note was something that came out of maybe a babbling book in another game.
Yep.
But some folks actually do put it in their deck to combat these Shaman totem boards, since powered with spell power, going to wipe out all the totems. Also do see that Hex down on Waterloo's side. That might deny the draw and let them keep a strong card advantage here. Looks like they're opting to go for the spell power and manage to get it. This will put Acolyte of Pain at 1 draw instead of 2.
Yep, and that's a big factor too. It's being able to utilize Spirit Claws effectively. And here's where they will begin their assault. With Totem Golem hitting the board, what this means is if they run into a situation where Eastern Michigan has Spell Power and Arcane Blast, they can't actually answer the Spell Power totem alongside of it, and so that will allow Spirit Claws to kill that minion as well. If that minion happens to be Azure Drake, they can even combine it with the Maelstrom Portal, maybe to get some value there, or just find other answers. The thing that's interesting to me is Waterloo was presented with the opportunity to hex the Acolyte and prevent all draws, but we've seen teams time and time again forego that, and I'm speaking partially from my own experience there, but Tempo Mage typically doesn't have a lot of threats to answer outside of Ragnaros. It's usually sort of the smaller to mid-sized stuff, so Hex just not really getting that much value in this matchup overall.
Yeah, we had mentioned earlier, if you're not aiming for Ragnaros or for Archmage Antonidas with those hexes, there are a lot of just smaller targets that you can afford to go ahead and throw it at. It's not a Control Warrior, it's not a Druid with Arcane Giants, it's Tempo Mage. They play through spells, and Hex, you know, it can't target spells. Right here in this board position, though, I'm not sure here what the possible best play is. We might have a Maelstrom Portal here, but that doesn't really build the board so much as just throwing a thing from below down. But I think you really do need to take care of this Azure Drake on this turn. Spell power very powerful in the hands of Tempo Mage.
Yes, I'm curious where they'll end up suiting on this one, because they have a lot of ways to take care of this, but every single one of them means something different. The Flame Tongue Totem is presenting a lot of strong value in this matchup, where, again, you don't need to line it up versus 3/2s because you have so many small ways to take care of that. But what do you actually use the totem pressure for? In this case, there's no Thunderbluff Valiant in hand. It's hard to extend that into Flame Strike a lot of times anyway, and so I think they're presented with an opportunity to use a normally weak card in this matchup to get some pretty significant value.
Right, they can swing both into here, or they can swing the Spirit Claws in here and then play a thing from below, because that Flame Tongue Totem reduced the cost of it, brought it down to 2.
Yep, so they actually will favor the pressure in this spot by expending some of their life and keeping the Wrath of Air Totem out. So now they've presented Eastern Michigan with 4 threats on board that need to be handled, and it's a turn before Flame Strike's available. So Waterloo threatening a ton of damage here, and they have a strong follow-up with Ragnaros. With all the utility in hand, if Eastern Michigan is just building board tension, that is a win for Waterloo. So they're forcing Eastern Michigan to have answers right now.
Can play that Blood Mage in combination with Arcane Explosion. That will clear out some of the minions. You can add the Arcane Blast to that. Might clear out the, you're going to clear out the thing from below, but you are going to leave a lot of board pressure on the board. There might be another way to do it with Sorcerer's Apprentice here. Play Sorcerer's Apprentice, Blood Mage, then go ahead and play Arcane Blast and Arcane Explosion. So you have at least a few more minions on the board. I'm not really seeing a strong way to combine these on this turn. It might be best to just, hey, you could just even Flamewaker here.
I am a little bit curious about the best way to pan this out, because they do have those. They have 3 major options, which is the first to take it slow. The second is Blood Mage Sorcerer's Apprentice combined with multiple spells. The third is Flamewaker Sorcerer's Apprentice combined with multiple spells. So which one of those pans out the best for them? They're going to elect to go with this line, and this cuts it a ton into the damage from Waterloo. So they leave up some pressure here, but they have Flame Strike. So this isn't liable to snowball way out of control for them. So I think Eastern Michigan kind of hedging their bets is a really good call here.
Another Flame Strike definitely going to kind of miss here if they throw a flame thing from below onto the board. They aren't going to have the spell damage available to deal 5 damage and not enough mana to use their hero power afterwards. So the second thing from below is going to stick. Picking up the healing totem, which without a flame strike might have been somewhat relevant here. So they're going to trade out into this and get that other thing from below on the board, put it on the left side there, get more use out of their flame totem in this stage. Is it time for flame strike?
That's a tough call. I mean, with the mirror entity picked up, there's not really an opportunity to use that to defend against anything. I'm curious if the portal has any merit here. The problem is you're leaving up 7 points of damage, so is Waterloo going to have the reach to push through this? You know, something else about the Rockbiter is that's bursts that you typically don't anticipate from a Shaman side. So if Eastern Michigan suffers too much damage, that is burst they almost certainly will not account for. So they're going to go with Flame Strike and cut that down to 5 points and look to swing this board back later on. And another utility spell drawn for Waterloo. This is going to spell Ragnaros for them. And that's about as strong as it gets right now because Eastern Michigan has no answer to this.
Yeah, Ragnaros very difficult to deal with in Tempo Mage decks where you don't have that polymorph. Only one really great way to get it in most of those versions of the deck, and that's with Babbling Book. And that's a long shot. Another card they could get, though, is Flame Lance, too, which could help deal with Ragnaros. But looks like they're just going to fill the board up here, get that Sorcerer's Apprentice, get the Flame Waker, start launching spells, and fill up the board. And they're going to get a little bit punished for this if they don't clear that Ragnaros.
Wow, I'm actually really surprised they chose not to portal on the Ragnaros here and use the 0-cost spells to clean this up. Instead, they favor card draw, and that means the Ragnaros has a fairly high potential to live in this situation.
Well, here's hoping. Arcane Missiles, you've got to do some work here.
They cannot clear that Ragnaros, and that Lightning Storm plus Maelstrom Portal is that's gonna end the game.
Right. There's only one. Oh, I don't think there's actually any way. They can just double Lightning Storm.
Yeah, double Lightning
here.
Storm, actually, with the Rockbiter. And that's part of the burst they didn't necessarily account for here. Eastern Michigan, perhaps a misstep alongside. Oh, they couldn't have played the portal alongside of it. What am I talking about? I'm just ridiculous. Ignore everything I said. Waterloo just a good setup here. Eastern Michigan fought back hard. Apologies.
Oh, I think we're all right here. Ragnaros just swatting the insect Jaina to take on. So for Waterloo to get another game under their belt in their wonderful win streak. Both these teams were 27-9, but Waterloo's pulling ahead to 28-9.
Yep, that sends Eastern Michigan down to 27-10 as well. See, I can math that one correctly. I had one of those moments where I just had infinite mana from that perspective.
Well, hey,
that's embarrassing.
Sometimes, you get that call from Millhouse Manastorm. He's calling you from the nether. He's saying, hey, you got infinite mana this turn. Go. And you're like, oh, sure I do. And you play all those spells. But you can't play your minions in that case either.
Yeah, they went for the best clear possible there. And it just, that's up to chance at that point. There was the Ragnaros pressure, honestly, was part of the big reason they had that was because of that second thing from below. So that draw was super important. I'm actually curious if there's anything else they could have drawn that would have emulated that pressure at that point. They wouldn't have had the mana for Thunderbluff Valiant to keep it active and then follow up with the Ragnaros. There's not really any other minion in the deck that lives through that point. So that second thing from below, actually a major draw for Waterloo, being a catalyst to the Ragnaros delivering that endgame damage. So that was actually a pretty huge deal, which now in hindsight looking at it, very fortunate draw.
Yeah, Flame Strike, it's one of those tricky things against Shaman early on. Normally, you'd let him build a big board and you'd be able to Flame Strike it down, but Thing from Below, Thunderbluff Valiant, they're really high health targets. So Flame Strike doesn't end up clearing everything. The good thing about Flame Strike, though, is sometimes when they don't have the Thunderbluff Valiant, you're able to wipe out all those Feral Spirits or whatever else. Sometimes they don't have that Thing from Below. So question is, can you keep a spell power on board potentially to power it up? So yeah, I think it's a little bit tricky here on their part. Flame Strike not always ending up with a board clear that you'd hope for.
Yep. Game number 2 getting underway, and it's going to be a Mage Mirror. And a Mage Mirror indeed. These are very similar builds. And this is a mirror match that is really unique, I think, to Hearthstone, where a lot of it is resource management. But one of Tempo Mage's major win rates is when it can just get off to the races and just push their opponent out of the game. When you're playing against a deck that has so many early game removal spells and you're combating with weak minions, it's very difficult to get that pressure. So this matchup kind of evolves into this weird kind of control game where the first person to actually start applying pressure can often fall behind because of that.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon to see one of those golden rules of Hearthstone broken in this matchup, where that rule being, of course, don't just launch all your damage at their face when you can. Sometimes you need those cards to kill some minions. But in this matchup, Flame Waker on the board, Arcane Missiles very well could just be used to go straight to face against an empty board.
Yep, and Eastern Michigan, a nod to the fact that it's difficult to actually start applying that early pressure. They're going to keep Azure Drake, but Waterloo, they keep Sorcerer's Apprentice and have the kind of hand that maybe tries to get an assault going here.
Yeah, usually you can eat up a lot of those spells in the early game with your 3/2s, and if you manage to do that and avoid the Sorcerer's Apprentice combined with, you know, cheapening the spells, making them one cost cheaper, you might be able to get away with soaking up a lot of those Flame Waker abilities. We do see in the hand of Eastern Michigan here, though, that very well might not be the case. Instead, they might be able to stick them. If they can stick them, they might run away with this.
And with another Cult Sorcerer drawn, they will start to apply some of that early pressure. And Eastern Michigan really just lacking the tools to fight against this right now.
This is one of those first tough decisions when you're playing a Tempo Mage. It's, if I have both Cult Sorcerer and a Sorcerer's Apprentice in hand, which do I play? And it gets further complicated by having both Cult Sorcerers in your hand. So now, hey, maybe that spell damage, having the versatility, the choice of playing the other two later on will lead me to play the Cult Sorcerer this turn, since I'll still be able to play the Arcane Blast later, combined with the Cult Sorcerer, of course.
I personally like the Cult Sorcerer here. I think it's the least valuable of the minions that are actually in Tempo Mage's deck. Serves a strong purpose, but right here, you're not going to find too much value with it, where the Sorcerer's Apprentice could enable such a strong turn for you that it's an important minion to keep around until that moment arises. So I think wise to do this. In Eastern Michigan, a little bit telling to Waterloo of the hand strength that Eastern Michigan has right now, and this may be the giddy-up moment for Waterloo.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where if you play another minion, you know you're playing into some kind of Flame Waker coin, one-mana spell thing, potentially. But if you don't play that, you're just going to see the other hero power potentially come out, and then you've just lost the value of eating up one of those Arcane Missiles and eating up the coin. So what I'd like to see here is, you know, a good decision on that. Maybe just playing the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and then when the Flame Waker comes down, you have the ability to remove it in two different ways.
Yep. Namely being the Cult Sorcerer and Arcane Blast. So I like the way that Waterloo has opened with this. Their hand just fairly weak with the options given here, and with Eastern Michigan throwing that hero power on the Cult Sorcerer, really opening up turns like this one with the Flame Waker.
So Flame Waker coin's going to give 2 missiles, Arcane Missile's going to give 3 more, and then 2 more from the Flame Waker. That's 7 total shots. Will they be able to hit? First 2, not so good. The second 2, not so good. A complete miss from the side of Eastern Michigan.
And both teams all smiles in light of that. And Waterloo, with that happening, I think this is the moment for them to really try to push Eastern Michigan to the test. I mean, this is clearly their way to fight against this wave. Now you've wiped that out. I mean, this is some serious damage that's going to pour in.
Right. They're not going to quite go for the push just yet. They're going to look and see if they can get a Flame Waker to combine with these, or maybe some other card here. And
does Eastern Michigan have to Fireball here?
You know, this might be one of those cases where you do. You know that spells are just going to keep removing your minions at this point, and then the minion pressure is going to combine over time. So yeah, I think Fireball is one of those rare cases where fireballing a 2-mana minion, absolutely important.
I mean, suddenly keeping the Azure Drake looks like a disaster with the way their hand has panned out. They've drawn almost entirely minions since then. The Ragnaros came early. The Acolyte of Pain alongside the Azure Drake is a bit too much draw right now. Sorcerer's Apprentice and Flame Waker, those are just dead in the hand.
Yeah, I think the plan here is you're going to Fireball, hope your opponent has exactly what they have right now, a bunch of spells that they're just not willing to throw away just yet. That's going to give you time to do Azure Drake, you'll eat one of their spells, and then maybe after that you can get a strong Flame Waker turn to come back into the game.
That starts with saying that you got to Fireball a 3-2, and that's a difficult call to make. They're going to go with Acolyte of Pain.
try and absorb 3 damage this way instead. They're probably going to get met with Frostbolt here. That way their minions don't sustain that extra damage. Now with this much damage in hand, it might be time for that Arcane Missiles to face. You've got 8. You've got another 7 with Fireball, and then you can even, well, you won't be able to hero power with the amount of mana you have, but you've got, what is that, 8 and 7? You've got 15 damage right there, and then another 6 from board.
The question is how they end up splitting this up. So if they choose to attack the Acolyte of Pain first, that means that they're saving the Frostbolt, but that's going to open them up to a hero power here. If they choose to Arcane Missiles first, obviously they're yielding a lot of draws to Eastern Michigan. If they choose to Frostbolt, they're overkilling the Acolyte of Pain. So figuring out how this damage gets split up and what your average draw of damage actually looks like is really important, because Waterloo right now is not going to win the value game. What their plan is to draw the damage necessary to finish at this point. And with 11, I mean, they have 19 damage in hand right now, so they're connecting with a ton. They are basically 2 hero powers off winning the game right now.
All right, 8 more to face here. They choose to use that other Arcane Missiles. I'm hoping that they do. Interesting that they decided to go ahead and attack use the Cult Sorcerer to attack, because that is going to potentially result in the ping, less spell power. But I think they have this locked up. Frostbolt ping, pretty much a guaranteed win. There's no way to heal, and there's definitely no way on 5 mana to deal 24 damage.
I mean, the thing about it is Waterloo. There's the victory bite. You see it? Waterloo pushed so aggressively in the early game, and Eastern Michigan just did not have the tools early to answer it. It's really important to have tools to answer it, and their hand got clunked up. Because of that, Waterloo found the one opportunity by choosing to play a Sorcerer's Apprentice, which oftentimes is just going to be a 1-for-1 trade. When they saw a weak turn from Eastern Michigan, they decided to couple that pressure. When Eastern Michigan went for the Flamewaker failed, and then they absolutely struck at that moment. That was the perfect window of opportunity for Waterloo in that spot.
Yeah, had we seen a Fireball on that Cult Sorcerer, that would have been 3 less damage from spell power, 3 less damage from the attack on the minion. So that's 6 less. So you're at least buying yourself a little bit more time in that case to maybe draw something off the Flamewaker, but it might not have been enough time either way. This just might have been one of those cases where you didn't get the Frostbolt, you didn't get the Arcane Blast, you didn't get the potential Roaring Torch or Flaming Torch or whatever, and yeah, you just ended up losing to the 3/2s in this case. Sometimes it happens.
That's a rough beat if you're playing Mage, because there's so many tools that are there to beat it. And of course, the Flamewaker failing, obviously, that's what created the window of opportunity for Waterloo. So when they go with the Acolyte, their hope is that Waterloo's hand is kind of similar to theirs. It's just minions that'll build up pressure and they can draw out of it. That didn't happen, and Waterloo, they're going with the Paladin now. I mean, I wanted to talk about the Rogue a lot. They self-banned the Rogue away, and this Paladin is meant to prey on matchups like Druid. Now, the thing about it is I have very rarely seen this actually work. Most of the time, whatever deck you're playing against, you do not have the pressure to keep it rolling. It requires you to have a lot of Murlocs die, to have Anyfin, to not be under pressure, and to have chipped away at your opponent's life total so that Anyfin actually can end the game either via card advantage or just via the damage in general. That's a very tall order from your deck, and a deck like Druid can piece together damage very quickly.
And, you know, there's always that possibility, too, and you'll see they actually mulliganed away the Doomsayer there, just a nod to the fact that Druid does take a while to develop. One thing about Anyfin is, you know, you have a maximum damage, and if Druid manages to find their 2 Feral Rages and find more from Raven Idol, they can actually get out of range of the Anyfin combo. Even the second Anyfin combo might not be enough damage to push through. That would be 46 health.
Yeah.
So Druid has some ways to get out of this, but they have to draw quickly. Basically, this is a card draw race.
Yeah, in this instance, Waterloo is often fighting against that damage clock, and so what that means is they're going to have extra pressure in here. And right away, we already see Ragnaros in the build, so they have understood that they do need something to be a catalyst to anything can happen. And of course, the Murloc's a very important facet to the deck. They kept Murloc Warleader in their opening hand. If they could just keep Eastern Michigan on the back foot and having to force answers of their own, that's an opportunity for Waterloo. But that Doomsayer not playing an important role in this matchup. It's there to fight against aggro decks. If they have it against Druid, it is effectively just a dead card in their hand. So they're fishing just for ways to get on the board and start fighting.
Going to be a couple slow turns here at the start. The Innervate not really valuable at this point might be coming into play next turn if they're feeling like, hey, we need to get this Azure Drake out here. That'll open up the swipe potentially. Not much they can open that up on truly against a Murloc Paladin. But these 1/1s will start coming into play. The double swipe, however, definitely a great way to contest Paladin's hero power. You can clean up as many of those as you want with a single swipe.
Yep, and they're eyeing that Murloc War Leader, but they do need to take into consideration what an Innervate Azure Drake would look like in this spot. And that, I think, is going to lead them down the hero power route. And Eastern Michigan, it's very rare that this deck actually just innervates out minions anymore. It's Fandral or pretty much save it for big combo turns. But in this spot, I think they are open to innervating Azure Drake and starting to try to apply some pressure. Now, the Wild Growth will deviate that. It'll delay the Azure Drake by a turn, but it'll draw them effectively and innervate in the process. So their plan was very clearly on the Azure Drake and got stunted a little bit. But does this open it for Waterloo to start their own pressure?
Well, Murloc War Leader is going to go down to start that pressure you mentioned. This does not quite reveal what kind of Paladin deck this is in terms of Murlocs. Is it the really late game one or not? The one card we do see, the Solemn Vigil, in the far left side of that Paladin hand is probably the big indicator that this is not a N'Zoth-focused deck. The Ragnaros, however, an interesting choice. As we mentioned before, does it mean instead of N'Zoth, it's the twin rags of the light and of the fire? If they have the twin rags, that's great. Did they opt to remove the Light Lord, though, and just put more pressure on? I don't think so.
It's definitely an interesting choice. I would venture to say Light Lord is in here, just such a fantastic finisher in a lot of situations. But either way, I think that you're right on the Solemn Vigil. Hamster piloted a N'Zoth Anyfin deck at the World Championships, and it was so late game focused that he often found himself just succumbing to pressure, just didn't have the job to get it done. Waterloo more focused on just actual damage to end the game, which is super important. Without Ragnaros in the build, it's so difficult for this deck to deliver any high pressure situations outside of Tyrion. So having that, I think, is going to be a critical part of them fighting in this game.
Time for that True Silver Champion to go down. It is only going to heal for 1 because it will max out the health before it does damage. Oh! Actually thinking about doing Acolyte here. Very interesting. Maybe they're putting a bluff out here.
I think that's very much up Waterloo's game plan. You've noticed they're having a pretty in-depth discussion, and the focus that he's had on every aspect of the game is leading me to believe that they can create the illusion that they have a hand different than what they have. Eastern Michigan may be finding themselves misstepping.
Well,
there's absolutely no way they don't choose silver here.
Absolutely not. But yeah, creating that illusion, hey, this other card on the right side of my hand might be another Murloc War Leader, for example, which would allow me to trade there.
Bluegill Warrior, maybe.
Yeah, Bluegill Warrior. A lot of different cards it could be at that mana cost available to them. They're showing that it is that mana cost. And this hand looks great from a Malagos perspective. If they can find the Emperor, they're pretty close to just ending the game with just Malagos here, if they get the time.
Well, they're actually... I mean, they're not like too far off. This is 7 plus 12 just with the Living Roots Moonfire Malagos combo. So that is 19 points of damage. So with the swipes here, I mean, look at how close they are to actually finishing the game.
28 damage? Wow. There is some healing in the hand, though, of Waterloo, so they're probably going to be able to get out of that particular nightmare scenario where the exact 7 cards they have on turn, on this next turn, are there for them. So they got some time here. They definitely have a long way to go to piece together the combo they need to finish the game before that.
Now, the question I have is Eastern Michigan willing to have that patience? Because they do have an opportunity to play Malagos here, and outside of Equality, Waterloo just does not have a way to actually kill Malagos. If that Malagos sticks, that is 27 burst just from hand that they have. So right now, if you look at the hands, if they take that risk, they're going to succeed unless Waterloo draws that Equality. But if the Equality's there, Eastern Michigan all but loses the game at that point. So I don't think it's a risk that they're going to be able to justify.
Equality a pretty common keep in this matchup too when you have it in the mulligan. You got plenty of ways to activate an Equality. You got the Wild Pyromancer, you've got the Consecrate, both of which would clear off your opponent's board, and in the Wild Pyromancer's case, your own board. They're opting to go with the ramp here, get rid of this Loot Hoarder, and hopefully, fingers crossed here, they can keep pushing on that pressure and draw that Emperor and close out the game in a couple turns.
Something else to note here too is that with that ramp, they are now an innervate off of having that burst simply from hand. And that innervate currently is from Raven Idol. So they have 2 draws in the build that can actually just end the game next turn. And that's not accounting for the Living Roots either. With the Living Roots draw, they would also end the game.
Oh, and might pick the Hammer of Wrath here for extra healing. That way they can get up to 27, but...
So a Living Roots here would give 26 burst to Eastern Michigan. With a swipe here, they win. I'm sorry, with an Innervate here, they win. And Nourish is going to dig for 3 more cards. Waterloo really under pressure, and I don't think they have any way to know it right now.
Yeah, this is pretty amazing here. And Arcane Giant, actually not a bad pickup. There's that Feral Rage we talked about earlier. Might opt to use it not to heal. And Emperor Tharasane, they're going to be able to discount this hand and have that massive burst available to them in a future turn. Is it right here potentially to Feral Rage the face?
I'm looking at that. I mean, it depends on your draw potential here. I think that the Emperor is going to help conceal some of your hand in this spot, because if Eastern Michigan lets Waterloo know that they have this much burst, they may be able to try to just get out of range of this, and Tyrion gets drawn. This is going to be close.
Yeah, this is interesting. They use the Innervate, which means that right now Malagos Swipe is not a possible combo. It's way too much mana. So instead, they now have 15 from Malagos with the extra spell damage. They have an additional 4 from their spells, bringing them to 19, and then 4 from Feral Rage, which is now 23 maximum damage. We do see the Hammer of Wrath go out here. That's going to allow them to keep the board on Waterloo's side. They're going to trade out this Murloc, make sure that they can keep building their Anyfin combo down the road, and this is going to... you see the mouse over Solemn Vigil. They're thinking of maybe some way that they can get that down to 2, coin out that, but they opt not to do that.
And how much burst is this from hand right now? It is 7, 19, 23 from hand for Eastern Michigan right now. So all they need to do is get Waterloo to 23 and get to their turn.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's going to be a swipe. Oh, no. Well,
that's 26 from hand. So actually right now, one of their best plays is to figure out a way to simply deliver a point of damage.
Yeah, and hey, swipe is swipe to the face. Might be indicating that. That might spook Waterloo into using a heal. Now, of course, we see they don't really have a heal in this case. But the True Silver Champion might be enough to get them out of just a hero power range. So... question is here, do you have to use both Swipe and Feral Rage to just attack them, get them low enough that they can't use any of those basic heals? Or are you worried about Ragnar's Light Lord, Forbidden Healing? So many options.
That's the thing, is all those healing options are there. So if Eastern Michigan pulls the trigger in this spot and they see that happen, it's gonna give Waterloo the go-ahead. But when they just hero power here instead, it makes their hand look like it could potentially be really clunky. And so if Waterloo says, 26 is safe enough, we're going to play Tyrion, Eastern Michigan gets the win.
Yeah, you can see Eastern Michigan leaning back in their chairs. They're just waiting for the result here.
It is hard to believe that there's 26 points from Eastern Michigan, that 26 is not safe in this situation. I don't think there's any way Waterloo can read that.
Yeah, this is turn 9 for them, too. They've ramped up quite a bit. Turn 8 for Waterloo, turn 9 for Eastern Michigan. All right, can you read the True Silver Champion play here?
There's
only
no
way out.
Nothing indicates that damage is there other than the fact that a lot of cards have been drawn and Emperor Thorasan's been played. It could just as easily be swipes and a Baron Geddon and Arcane Giants that they're building towards. I mean, they've only played 6 spells this game. Tyrion's going to be the play, and that means Eastern Michigan's going to force game number 4. Wow.
See the smiles on their face. Let's see the look on Waterloo's face here when they see this combo come out. Will Eastern Michigan, though, identify it? Looks like they're
If you are playing this deck and you don't identify this situation, do not play this deck.
Yeah, you gotta be pretty good at math here to add numbers together, including the spell damage. But yep, they see it. Waterloo's looking at it. They nod in acceptance there.
He winced like, oh gosh.
I think
really
they were thinking about it.
Shaking his head too. Like, this is the only way that we really lost this game was this situation.
How many cards left in Eastern Michigan's deck? Because the odds of it being here are probably pretty low.
It's fairly low at this point. I mean, you are going to get these draws sometimes. It's part of what makes the deck so powerful. But against a deck like Paladin, Paladin's not applying enough pressure to force anything from Eastern Michigan, and that's one of the reasons that combo decks thrive in control metagames is the control decks just don't apply the pressure necessary to keep them on the back foot.
Yeah, the Paladin curse continues today. It's been quite a ride for Paladins, I think. Do you think they're going to even be able to pick up a game with this against the other two decks?
The problem I'm seeing is that the Mage is going to operate fairly similarly to the way that the Druid build does, which is just trying to get enough pressure rolling that over the course of 2 turns, they can burst you from hand. The one difference is that when the Mage is trying to burst you from hand, it gives you a window of opportunity to have Forbidden Healing in a big spot like that. Now, versus the Shaman, it is a very different matchup. This is not a burst deck that Eastern Michigan's going to be playing most of the time. So when they're in that situation, the board clears are what's paramount. If Waterloo can find a matchup versus Shaman where they're able to simply take care of threats piece by piece, that's where they're going to find their win condition. But as far as I'm concerned, we are seeing a game number 5.
Yeah, I have to agree. This is going to be a ride here. It's going to be a ride on these Murlocs. Will they come out? Will Murlocs be the way that this week ends?
And for Eastern Michigan, I don't think that there's really an opportunity here for them to do anything other than play the Mage in this spot. I don't think they got a significant enough information from Waterloo to identify some potential tech choices there. So if they go with this Mage, which is already going to be a fairly linear game plan for them, maybe they get some more information that helps them in that Shaman game.
Yeah, that might be the case here. The Mage, of course, a tempo Mage, as we said before. So, is getting any information going to help them with their Shaman at this point? Do you think they pretty much know the deck? I know they didn't see the Solemn Vigil.
Exactly. So this, I mean, it could still be an Azoth build. It could be something a little bit slower, but they're going to go with the Shaman straight away. And I guess if you got to get the win with it, you got to get the win with it. And Waterloo already has one of the key cards in hand, Doomsayer.
Yeah, playing that Doomsayer early on, there's very few ways that it can actually be dealt with. In the early game, you'd have to have some pretty interesting combinations of cards.
Is Eastern Michigan going to keep a Manatide Totem here?
Did they throw Totem Golem away?
I don't think they threw Totem Golem away, but if you're going to keep Manatide Totem, it would almost make sense because you'd want it online as quickly as possible.
Yeah, okay. Well, interesting line of play here. Kind of plays a little bit around Doomsayer because there's nothing really to Doomsayer in the hand. So, yeah, I'd like to see how this turns out this time.
That is an interesting thought to consider, too. If Doomsayer is one of the critical cards in the matchup, how do you offset that? Well, one of the ways could be a lot of card draw and looking for inflection points. So say that they have Bloodlust in the deck. Every single time they get a stretch of minions on board, that could be threatening to Waterloo in that situation. And so when they find themselves in a spot like this and they intend to keep Manatide, they have a game plan in mind. This is not just, well, Manatide's a good card, I guess I'll keep it. They're up to something.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what that might be. Oh, Murloc Warleader coming out, which could be pretty strong here. Doomsayer is actually going to delay that Manatide play. But playing Doomsayer here, one of the problems with it is if Eastern Michigan had a Thing from Below in their hand, they'd be able to just totem up, and then they would be able to just play Thing from Below the next turn, which is a difficult minion for Murloc Paladin to deal with just by itself.
Yeah, I'm really curious where Waterloo goes with this. The Loot Hoarder already checked by the Spirit Claws. Normally a minion that's pretty strong against Shaman, but turn 1 Spirit Claws offsetting that. Hero Power is already checked 3 times by the Spirit Claws, which is kind of servicing as just making sure that they don't get overwhelmed by the smallest amounts of pressure. Waterloo's got a lot of strong tools, but they have to use them properly. And so they're saying that the tempo into Murloc Warleader is something that they want.
Right, and that is going to shut down that Manatide plan, as I said before. The Murloc Warleader also shutting it down potentially a little bit more, but the spell damage is available to take out that Warleader coming up. This turn, the trick is to judge whether or not Solemn Vigil's in the hand. If you totem up here, you're opening up Solemn Vigil coin, Solemn Vigil for 4 card draws. They didn't see it last turn, so they might not be reading at this point. So you're weighing the play Totem versus discount that. With 3 mana, though, Totem is a pretty good choice.
Yeah, I think that discounting your own Thing from Below is much more important than potentially raising the cost on your opponent's Solemn Vigil here. And Waterloo going to go with the Murloc Warleader, it looks like.
Yeah, playing second Doomsayer, definitely an option here, though. It is going to allow them just another turn, but Doomsayer might end up being a heal later on instead. Right now, just kind of a tempo reducer, maybe not as effective as it could be.
They're fearing spell damage from Eastern Michigan.
Yeah,
is what they're
you
fearing.
can just see it here. I mean,
And shaking their head like, oh, there's just no other play. Like, all the rest of them are just bad.
yeah, it's 2 apples in one hand, 2 oranges in the other. Yeah, we're bringing it back from yesterday.
Harrison Jones gets drawn too. Card that could be very key in fighting against True Silver Champion, finding the extra draws necessary to fight against it.
Wrath of Air coming out here is somewhat impactful.
No, they're throwing the claps. They don't know that Blood Mage is there. So this will make them a little bit happier when they see the Blood Mage. Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, he definitely said, oh, okay there, didn't he?
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, we got to get those other guys in the frame, see how they're reacting here. So, all right, here. Doomsayer, a little bit more sketchy at this point because there's a little bit more answers that could be there. There could be a Flame Tongue Totem. There could be Hex, which is probably not the best choice in this case. Usually you're saving Hex for Murlocs or for Tyrion in this game, in this particular matchup. So, Doomsayer possibly coming down here with Loot Hoarder just to try to keep the board under wraps.
Yeah, this is an interesting use of the Doomsayer because I think they do have an opportunity to find a clear later on and use the Doomsayer to effectively buy back the tempo when they've invested a lot into the clears. Here they're saying, we just want to start cycling and find a way to start pressuring. Their hand is very light on things to actually do right now for Waterloo's side, but that's part of the problem with playing this combo deck. There's a lot of cards that don't operate very well on their own. You need synergies taking place. They've drawn both of their Ragnaros, both the Light Lord and the Fire Lord, and they're nowhere near being able to play those. If they don't keep Eastern Michigan at bay, they will overwhelm them. They don't have an equality clear right now. I mean, what options do they really have? I see this going Eastern Michigan's way a lot of the time because of that, and they're going to cut straight into the Solemn Vigil potential right away with those draws. But a second Murloc War Leader's drawn, and if Waterloo can keep picking up those kinds of draws, they may find themselves getting to an anyfin turn.
Right, and Hex still an opening here, but probably not going to be the play. You would have hexed a little bit. You would have swung and hexed earlier. So at this point, they're thinking, do we want to totem up here, give them that cheaper Solemn Vigil? That'll give them access to double Solemn Vigil, potentially. There may only be one Solemn Vigil in Waterloo's deck, though, and it does discount the thing from below. So once again, making that similar decision to the earlier turn.
Yeah, I think consistency is important to go through there. And a second Forbidden Healing is no help. And Eastern Michigan looks like they may have an opportunity to finally land this Mana Tide Totem.
Yeah, they can combine that with the Cobalt Geomancer, get that swing on the Murloc War Leader, and hopefully leave that Mana Tide up for many turns. Getting those extra threats will help if Waterloo does manage to whiff on all of its card draw. If it doesn't pick up those Solemn Vigils, it doesn't pick up Lay on Hands if it's in the deck, it's a lot of cards that it can just not be able to draw.
That's something the deck definitely suffers from. You have to have a lot of cards dedicated to clearing boards. Consecrations need to be in there. Quality's got to be there. You got to have ways to heal and deal damage. That's Tyrion and Ragnaros in the build. You need the Forbidden Healings to stabilize versus the aggressive decks. You need to have 2 Infants in there. You got to have 4 Murlocs. Like, so much is taking away from your potential to keep card draw in your deck. And so not only are they missing it right now, but it's fairly situational on top of that.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the Mana Tide actually ends up getting played here. It's definitely died in the hand at this point. Azure Drake could easily be the choice here, coming down and with Tunnel Trog just to get more board pressure out there. Because at some point you do have to provoke those bigger hands. You definitely could do some other combinations here. You could even use a Lightning Bolt so that you can at least swing at the 1/1 and leave nothing on the board. That reduces the chance that your minion's going to die. So a lot of different ways this can be handled. I think the way they're going about it, probably one of the better ones.
I am a little bit curious about the Mana Tide keep if they don't intend to play it early on, because the Mana Tide's going to be harder to secure draws from, where the Azure Drake's basically always drawing a card. And so in this situation, I think the Azure Drake is a lot of coming to the board in light of the Harrison Jones in hand, where Waterloo hasn't had an opportunity to use True Silver just yet. So if they use True Silver here, they get to swing it back with Harrison Jones. So this play, I think, is a little bit weaker than the Mana Tide alongside the Cobalt Geomancer, but they're playing to trap Waterloo in one of their best plays.
Yeah, and not much they can do about this board here. If they choose to use Equality Consecrate, they're really getting nothing out of it. Azure Drake drew a card, so they're essentially not trading very well with the board, probably coming out behind. They definitely are going to keep this coin for the twin rags. They could play them back-to-back here, so it's really just a question of, if I'm going to coin rag and play the other rag, is it time to just consecrate? Is it time to just use these abilities so that I will be able to do that without worrying about the board just getting out of control?
Yeah, I think with 2 Forbidden Healings, Waterloo's got plenty of time to take this a little bit slow. The Equality Consecration would be going all in on the Twin Rags, getting the job done. So that is an option they had available to them. But if they run into Hex, if they just run into strong board pressure, just strong damage from hand to kill their Twin Rags, Waterloo's done for. And so they've got to be patient in a spot like this and hope that their draws can get them out of it.
Looking at Eastern Michigan here, easy to take care of these 2 1-1s. It's just a question of pressure. You got to be wondering. At this point, they're probably board clears in Waterloo's hand. They didn't play anything last turn, so you know there's no Ivory Knight, which would have been a pretty easy play. So you can probably get a good read on this that they have board clear.
Yeah, the problem is, if you take it slow from Eastern Michigan's side, how do you actually get the job done? Because you're not going to win this game strictly on a card advantage battle. Eventually, the clock works against them. So they need to pace themselves, but they also do need to get pressure rolling. And so I'm curious where it starts for Eastern Michigan. How do they navigate it if they anticipate board clears? Because Waterloo, if I'm in Eastern Michigan spot, I'm definitely reading Waterloo for having some of that action in their hand. Now, it could equally just be dead cards like anything can happen. But if you're wrong and you apply too much pressure, you're going to give Waterloo a ton of time.
Yeah, your hand you're hoping for here is double anything, double Forbidden Healing, the coin, and maybe, you know, some wild Pyromancers there. We haven't actually seen a wild Pyromancer yet, so kind of wondering if they even run it at this point. I almost have no doubt that they do. Solemn Vigil has an opportunity to be discounted here if they choose to put this Silver Hand Recruit into the Searing Totem. Reduce its cost to 3, let them draw some more cards. There are also other options here. They can Consecrate. That's going to make it even cheaper. It does, however, remove their Equality Consecrate combo. So I'm thinking the Consecrate's probably going to be the way to go here.
Yeah, they are getting some card draw here with the Solemn Vigil, so I actually like cutting into the Mana Tide and restricting draws, expending the Consecrate to discount the Solemn Vigil and keep going from there. That also keeps their hero power on board. The thing about it is, with the 2 rags in hand, when are they finding time to actually use these cards? So if they can force hexes now and keep Eastern Michigan playing a little bit slow, they may feel pressured to actually develop the board position, and that's when Waterloo can use the Equality Clear combo here. But the problem with that is the Mana Tide churning. If Eastern Michigan paces that, all of those plays they're making are slowly getting replaced.
Looks like they're opting to do that, try to get one of these hexes and maybe get a favorable rag shot on one of these minions. Ragnaros, the Fire Lord, coming down. Where's he going to hit?
That's a nice one.
Probably the best target because it will prevent a just standard clear on Ragnaros with damage and instead provoke a potential hex from Eastern Michigan. That might open up Light Lord. It's also going to reduce the amount of mana they can spend this turn. Another option, though, for Eastern Michigan is they do have the Divine Shield on their Horse Rider. They can put more totems on the board, and that will just allow them to maybe soak up some more rag shots.
I'm curious when the assault starts for Eastern Michigan. I mean, they may be a bit shy on the Hex because they know Tyrion's there.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they're thinking of using Lightning Bolt and using Feral Spirits here, and then combining all that to with their Tunnel Trog to clear Ragnaros this way. That saves their Hex for other targets like Tyrion, for another Rag potentially. So I think they're trying to think of how do we clear this without that. No, it's the face plan now. This is when they're going to apply the pressure.
Don't worry, love. The cavalry's here.
Oh, there it is. With the spell damage in hand, the Lightning Bolt's going to deal 4. This is going to allow them to clear the board, keep a pretty strong board presence here. And even though they're a little bit vulnerable to Consecrate with their other minions, it's not quite enough.
The Mana Tide, being at 3 health, is just outside of this. And if they have quality here to deal 2 damage, that's not going to work very well.
Yeah, I'm thinking the Consecrate might come down.
Oh, my.
Oh, this will discount both Solemn Vigils. It is going to give them 4 card draws, so...
It's a lot of ramp on the draw, but you just used an equality to deal 2 effective damage. That is not the purpose of that card.
Yeah, well, here come the cards. Oh, and the Bluegill Warrior. This should actually be a trap to play right now. If they play that, it will get Hex. And this is the most, contrary to what most people say, Bluegill Warrior is actually the best Hex target if you're worried about the Murloc combo. Because without Chargers, they can't do damage with any Fin. It reduces their damage by much more than the Murloc War Leaders ever would.
It's an interesting perspective. Now, Eastern Michigan, are they thinking that? Would they ever Hex the Bluegill Warrior?
Hey, you got 2 Hexes in hand at this point, yeah.
And Waterloo knows that it's best serviced as an effective 2 damage spell in this situation, so will pace themselves afterwards. But they are starting to put together the makings of some Anyfin combo. And Eastern Michigan is far away from killing Waterloo right now. They have so many ways to protect themselves.
Yeah, you don't really have many ways to heal yourself if you're fighting against that Murloc combo. It is going to kill you. The first one doesn't. The second one will definitely kill you. And it's also very difficult to remove without large AoE. And we don't see any of that area of effect in Eastern Michigan's hand. So Feral Spirit is coming down. Totem Golem coming down as well. They're going to just fill up the board. They've seen one of the board clears. And now it's time to say, hey, if you have the second board clear, we're going to fill up the hand again next turn as well.
Debating on killing this little silver hand recruit. And there's the second equality, but not much to couple with it. I could definitely see Light Lord hitting the board this turn.
Yeah, Light Lord would be a very strong play. Only alternative I can really see is Bluegill, Algor, or Peacekeeper, just to try to build a board. You'd be able to clear one of the Feral Spirits, but it might play against Bloodlust a little bit. But, you know, is that playing to win the match, or are you just playing to kind of survive a little bit longer? Ragnaros probably a better chance to win the match in the long run.
I could definitely see the Acolyte as well, because they are only a couple cards off of really getting this done, and with the equality draw, it means that they're that much closer to a board clear. So if they find a Wild Pyromancer or a second Consecration, that's an opportunity for them to continue to wipe this board. The major goal for them is to get to an Anyfin turn and get to it safely. So that's going to spell Acolyte of Pain.
Bouncing over Forbidden Healing, which would be an interesting heal for 8 here. Probably not what they need right now, but yeah, other
They're
option.
accounting for Bloodlust and extra burst damage. So if they use Forbidden Healing, that's exactly what they're thinking about.
Yeah, it would be 14, 15 on board with Bloodlust. So they're thinking, hey, we're not going to risk it. We have 2 of these in hand. They're just kind of clumping things up. Let's take a break. Okay. Thunderbluff Valiant could buff up 2 of these minions here, start the pressure once again. A lot of healing in the hand of Waterloo, though. That might not be enough to handle it. There's definitely that Totem Golem into Acolyte ability there just to deny the draws instead of pushing maximum face damage as well. So I think, yeah, Eastern Michigan, a pretty clear turn here, pretty clear series of turns. Oh, Cobalt Geomancer we should mention too. That would allow them to choose the Spirit Claws to hit this Acolyte of Pain as well.
Eastern Michigan, I don't know if they can tiptoe around too much longer here.
Time to push.
I think a lot of it comes down to what you feel the hand range is for Waterloo. And the way that the game has panned out so far, I think it's difficult for them to have a strong read on what's there. You know, they're hesitant to go too far because of the second equality clear, and they're wondering if this is enough to actually force that. Waterloo, a lot of healing in hand, and again, no Bloodlust. They are fearing Bloodlust for sure, but is there going to come a point where they can't play around it anymore? Because that's what this turn looks like.
Yeah, I think they might be looking for the Consecrate here from Ivory Knight so they can get that board clear next turn. They also might be looking for Avenging Wrath, which would also combine very well with Equality. So a couple options there that they could get from it that would allow them to clear it next turn. It doesn't do much for him this turn, though. It will definitely be paired with the True Silver Champion in that case. Is there anything that could come off of it now that they could use? I'm not thinking there is anything that's just pertinent to this turn to combine with Ivory Knight. Definitely a play to wait for another turn. Deciding which Feral Spirit to hit. There is some positioning considerations to be thought of here. You could hit the one on the left, but that one might be in a little more awkward of a position for Flame Tongue Totem. So maybe a consideration there, probably a very minor impact. Sacred Trial actually relevant here.
I mean, that's an interesting one because The Shaman board being full means that you're presented with an opportunity for that, but if you take a 1-cost card, you're healing for less, and you are giving your opponent some information about that. I think the 1-cost ones are, of course, the widest range, but most easily identify depending on how your opponent's actually playing against this. So with the Divine Favor taken here, they are a little bit more free to start expending their resources and hoping Divine Favor can net them a couple card draws here. The fact that they now know Bloodlust is not there for Eastern Michigan, they're not seizing 15 damage right here, and that is almost certainly something they would have done with Bloodlust. Waterloo can now play a little bit more liberal with their life total and look for a big swing turn later.
Yeah, it's actually looking like Lethal is quite a bit away for Eastern Michigan at this point. So, they're pushing damage in here. 12 damage on board, 4 in hand. That's still not enough to actually win right here. If they clear 2 minions, though, that's going to add more damage to the board than they're removing because of Thunderblood Valiant.
Yeah, Waterloo's got to kind of tiptoe around here and figure this out the right way.
Looks like they're going with the Divine Favor here. They're going to draw as many cards as they can. They got to find that board clear. And now, if you're clearing 2 minions here, I think you're using that True Silver on the Stone Claw instead of one of the Feral Spirits at this point. That will reduce more Thunderblood Valiant damage in the future.
It also heals you a little bit here, putting damage on the Ivory Knight instead.
They're making that decision now because they definitely have a lot of different ways they can do this to keep the Ivory Knight healthy. I don't think that's probably the wisest decision. They can also, but it's really about the True Silver into Feral Spirit or Stoneclaw Totem. Which are we going to hit here? At this point, with the hand size of Eastern Michigan, you've got to have a read on Thunderblood Valiant. It's fairly common at this point, probably over a 75% chance to be in hand. Using all the time available to them.
So tough. I mean, they still didn't find a board clear. They're actually just not going to attack. They say, if you want to attack, you're going to have to trade into our minions here. So I think they're trying to bait Eastern Michigan into simply just attacking face or taking, just value trades here and not spotting something like Thunderbluff Valiant for the burst potential. This is a really weird play.
Yeah, I'm not sure that actually makes much sense. They have the opportunity to trade 2 things in here regardless. So the Thunderbluff Valiant will be able to be brought out, but it will force them to trade both Feral Spirits.
I mean, it is sort of an awkward play here, too. I mean, when you're in Eastern Michigan spot, how often do you just purposefully trade minions in so that they die and you have board space? How often are you even in that situation?
Pretty sure this is lethal, though. If they trade both Feral Spirits in, they have... Oh, no, never mind. Harrison Jones at 1. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 damage, and 4 from hand. So they're a little bit off. So if Harrison Jones wasn't outward there, they would have had it. But that was not the case this time.
So they are spotting this to some degree. So Maelstrom Portal.
Oh, hey.
But that fills up the board. They can't Thunderbluff here. And they're not going to Ragnaros. They actually fill up the board with another totem here. So the pressure from Eastern Michigan really light in this spot. And this gives Waterloo an opportunity. They find a Wild Pyromancer here, but they had 2 ways to get out of this. Number 1, Forbidden Healing just to full and then wait, which they still might take. If they Forbidden Healing here, they're only staring at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 damage. So they would fall to 21 and then have the option to board clear later on. The thing about it is their hand is strong enough, I think, to just start going for it.
Using the equality, they're going to get rid of the bluegill so that they can avoid the hex on it before they go ahead and use the Wild Pyromancer to heal up here. Now, this sequencing here actually was missed by a couple players in last year's Hearthstone World Championship Tour, where you got this kind of muscle memory of Wild Pyro equality. But if you play equality first, Wild Pyro can be used, the Forbidden Healing can be used afterwards. So even the best players in the world didn't spot that last year. It's just kind of been a new thing for this season up until this championship.
I actually had that play come across in WCA China versus Alchemist. I kept the 3-1 Wild Pyromancer around and managed to deal 6 damage.
Hey, as many...
And that was the difference between winning and losing a game.
Persistent damage. There's a lot to be said about it. Even 1 minion, even 1 point of damage. That. Lord Walker Cho says it best in the tutorial. Even 1 point of damage can be the difference between victory and defeat. There he is right there.
You know, I remember spotting that too, and I was like, oh, man. I've never done anything like that. That was... Good job, me. I didn't mess it up.
It's always good when you can pat yourself on the back there and say, yeah,
and then
I did it. I nailed it.
And I swiftly lost the series.
Okay, Arcane Anomaly. I think we saw
Eastern
one of those
Michigan's
before.
been taking it so slow. I don't know if they can afford to take the game this slow. I mean, they've got to get something going. They have to know Waterloo is on the brink of these big turns.
Yeah, double anything, not quite enough just yet because of the object in their way there, the Stone Claw. When they get the second anything, there's only going to be 2 chargers that come out of it, and that's assuming that they don't just get that other charger hexed. There's still the possibility of that hex, and then anything number 2 is only going to be 1 charger again. So they're not quite there yet. They're close. They're not quite there yet. They are going to opt to play with the anything now to get board presence here and potentially set up that
portals.
combo.
They've seen.
Oh, there actually were 2 blue
Yeah.
bills.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I forgot to mention that. There was the
Yeah,
blue bill
missed that.
early on that was played. I was so enthralled with what you were talking about that I just forgot about it. But here, they need to consider, is there any way they actually lose this game from Burst? And that's exactly what they're thinking about right now. This anyfin is massive.
So the only way to lose at this point would be, the only way they could stop this is if they double hexed their own minions, got a Stone Claw totem, and were still able to clear the board somehow.
I think they're trying to think about how they die. A lightning bolt has already been used this game as well, so something they can't die to is double lightning bolt rag shot to the face. That was not an out. That was an opportunity. But could they have died to, say, Bloodlust, Flame Tongue Totem, Lightning Bolt? So that would have been 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, plus 4, 17, plus 4, 21. So 21 was the max damage I'm counting unless there's something else I'm missing. So double Flame Tongue, but a Flame Tongue's already been used this game. So I'm curious if Waterloo, like what they're actually accounting for in that situation, because as far as I can tell, there's actually not a way they could die unless they're accounting for Rockbiter, which is something that they're playing in their own build.
So here, how are we getting out of this one here? I think you got to get the Stone Claw totem. You got to hex one of these Murloc War Leaders potentially. Trade into one of the Arcane, trade the Arcane Anomaly into one. Use the Lightning Bolt to kill the other War Leader.
And then hope that there's not another anything on the other side.
Yeah.
Which that's not the case.
Yep. It's
In
gone.
Waterloo, a slow and steady race. Eastern Michigan paces themselves quite a bit in this game, and Waterloo finds the time to get another anyfin, and the celebration hat comes on. Waterloo's going to take the set 3-1 and be another grand finalist. Wow.
Yeah, looks like there's more than one Sorcerer's Apprentice in this series. Waterloo's got their own on the screen right now. So, hey, look at those smiles there. You know, they're having a good time. Oh, there it is. The victory bite.
The victory bite.
Maybe the first one wasn't that premature. They just knew how this series was going to go.
I'll tell you what, Waterloo played a fantastic set in this one. The fact that they're checking every single situation they can is really showing through, not only just in their body language with the discussion, but in the way that you're looking at how they're approaching the game. It is so very clear that they are dotting every I and crossing every single T in the match. Just a fantastic set to watch.
Yeah, with that one, the Paladin curse of the last 2 days has been broken. Paladin has picked up a game.
Yes, indeed it has, which brings us our 6th grand finalist that we've seen on broadcast this week, and it has just been so cool to watch from these two guys. I mean, there's that last game you could talk about for so very long, but I think the big key factor here was just the Eastern Michigan taking it so slow. They never really put the test to Waterloo except for the one turn where they had the threat of Bloodlust. When they didn't see Bloodlust, that's when they knew they could start taking risks.
Yeah, it does speak to Bloodlust quite a bit because these are the kind of matchups that you put Bloodlust in your deck for. It's just to get that massive burst at the end when your opponent just can't handle the board. And it prevents healing. You can't heal up after you've just taken a massive swing of damage. So what they were playing, I think they were playing scared of heals for too long, or scared of board clears for too long. And eventually you can't just play to your outs. You got to play to how to win.
Yes, indeed, and that's something that it definitely can be accounted for in some of these matchups. So that's going to wrap it up for today. Let's take a look at how the matches panned out. Of course, in today's matches, we had Carnegie Mellon University dropping 3-1 versus Lehigh University, and then our second set, it was the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, taking it 3-2 over a very close set against the University of Toronto. In the match we just saw, Eastern Michigan University couldn't quite close versus the University of Waterloo, taking it 3-1 and breaking that Paladin curse. So as we said, 6 semifinalists just on broadcast alone this week, which that's going to be wrapping up this weekend. So the Tespa for Hearthstone is going to be taking place the same channel right here, twitch.tv/Play Hearthstone. You're going to want to make sure you catch it because then it's going to be determining the four teams that will be advancing to that LAN finals. But we also want to remind you that while Hearthstone is going to be ending today, we do have Overwatch coming up on Wednesday and Thursday. It's going to be so cool to watch, and plus the regional finals for that is also taking place this weekend at 12 p.m. Pacific. So let's take a look at the bracket and see how the teams have lined up. And there it is. 8 teams remain across 4 regions.
Yeah, this is really exciting. What's really cool here is these people have met in so many different ways, too. You've met on Facebook. You've met on these subreddits, even for your school. I mentioned Discord servers for school. I thought that was pretty surprising, too. You may have just joined Tespa for the T-shirt at this point, but no matter how you ended up there, now they're playing. These teams have won $2,500, and now they're playing for the big bucks this week.
$50,000 in scholarships on the line in this tournament, and we'll find out who's going to be making it to that LAN finals. The action for Hearthstone is going to continue on Saturday, and on Sunday, the regional champions for Overwatch are going to be there. So that's going to wrap it up for today. We do, of course, want to thank those who have made this broadcast possible. But before we do that, we do want to remind you to show your school spirit here as well. You can visit us on Facebook, or you can tweet at Team Tespa. And if you're looking to get into some competition for yourself, there are so many opportunities to do so. Over $1 million in scholarships has been given out, from Heroes of the Dorm to the Overwatch that's happening, the Hearthstone event at PAX South earlier this year. Tespa's constantly got stuff going on. You can find out more information at tespa.org. And those who make the broadcast possible, of course, we're powered by Twitch here at the studios in Burbank. But we also want to give a thanks to Gunner and Steel Series for contributing to these players and helping the dreams come true. So that's going to wrap it up for us this week. Remember, Saturday, the action continues as we find out our 4 final teams right here on this channel, twitch.tv/Play Hearthstone. So for everyone in production, for myself, and for Bob Backus, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you this weekend.